Evening, everyone. I've joined a minute early, and I'm going to be joined by the wonderful Clover Stroud, who is. Hang on, I'm just trying to get her to join me. Where is she? There we go. I'm going to. She hasn't joined me. Hold on. Let me see if I can find her. Clover. There we go. She is an amazing author and go live. She is the author of two books, My Wild and Sleepless Nights and My Wild. Hello, Clover.
Hi.
Hello. So nice to see you. I was just saying who you were. Which do you say first? Do you say you're an author or a mother of 5 children?
Oh, I always say my work first, actually. I do. I'd always say I'm a writer and journalist first, yeah. But I am also the mother of 5 children who are shouting outside the window. You might hear them shouting.
So, I mean, there's where to start. We're going to look at kind of the pandemic and the abnormal new normal, if there ever was a normal, but we're certainly aware of what's abnormal now. And I was just kind of going to start with your post about it, is that you're finding life pretty odd.
Yeah, I posted this morning on my stories, actually, because I have been feeling this sort of, I've been really interested generally by the way the pandemic has been marked by different kind of psychological states. And when I have talked to Instagram about it, because that has generally been the place where I've talked about it, I've found
Where you've had contact. I mean, I've
yeah,
had more contact through Instagram than I ever have
and
through
sort of
anything else through the
no,
pandemic.
definitely, and possibly more honesty. People can be very honest here, I think, as well. And so I've been interested by the way that we've shared psychological states right from the start of the pandemic. And right now I've been feeling really kind of uneasy and fractured and sort of uncertain about things, and finding normal things like now, the normal return to kind of social interactions, for example, I have found really exhausting, really, really tiring. And I, normally I'm a relatively sociable person and I see people in normal life quite a lot, but my desire to kind of be alone is more and more acute than ever. And it's a kind of, sometimes that feeling worries me, because I know also the desire to be alone can be a kind of slide into depression as well, that feeling of not wanting to see people and not wanting to talk about stuff. But it sort of feels, right now life feels very, very uncertain, and as though we should be going into normal life, and yet none of us really know what normal life is anymore. And I was very aware when the pandemic started that I didn't want to just go back to, everyone kept saying, when are we going to go back to normal? And I've always felt like, as with grief as well, that there should be some kind of evolution, there should be some kind of change. And it worries me that we're kind of going back to normal, yet we haven't changed. If we have changed, it's only in an uncertain and negative way, I suppose.
Because in a way, what you're saying, which is parallel to grief, and the pandemic, of course, for some people has brought very real grief and also many living losses, is that you want to assimilate and process it and let it change you. So you don't want to try and jump back into life as it was. And also just kind of finding your social engagement when it's been so radically reduced is using much more energy than before, so that you can't even begin to expect yourself to just jump back in, because it's like a muscle that you haven't been into the social gym, as it were. And you
Yes.
can't expect to run for 50 minutes on the running machine if you haven't done it. And other people are saying, I'm finding the same.
But it's like, it then makes you start thinking, well, is it natural? Is it good for us to have that level of social interaction, and that kind of, you know, we often had people to stay for the weekend, or, you know, you'd see people and have long conversations and long kind of meandering social interactions. And now I find that feels as though it demands too much of me. And then it's also made me think, well, is it a more natural state not to have that? And you know, I wouldn't say that we were all wildly happy before the pandemic either. You know, I think it's interesting that people often talked about a mental health crisis before the pandemic, and a feeling of kind of discontentment with the way we were living, I suppose. And I don't think it's just the pandemic. You know, I think it's also, in a big way, the strange sense of what is going on in the world, and a strange sense of what's happening in this country, and a kind of, today when I've done this story, a lot of people have responded saying it's also a fear about the current government, and the idea of food shortages and labour shortages and Brexit, and you know, are we in hands, I suppose, you know, are we being looked after as a nation as well?
Are we in
Plus
safe, we're not, are we in safe hands? We're not in safe hands, sort of feeling.
Yeah.
But, and I think that's true, is that it's not like everything was perfect before. And for some people, it has made worse pre-existing fault lines. Like, I mean, someone was saying, Helen was saying, this is what living with chronic fatigue and illness always felt like. And I'm wondering, Helen, maybe that has been intensified during the pandemic. And certainly people that were anxious before, or had anxiety, you know, were depressed before, I think through the lack of social interaction and through this uncertainty of all the things you said, and the health anxiety of what the pandemic was going to kind of do to us, that's definitely been intensified. And a YouGov survey came out today, actually, from the Tavistock, which said 4 out of 10 people think the pandemic has affected their mental health in a negative way that's going to take a long time to recover. But the thing that I'm wondering with you, and I've got from your Instagram posts, is it's changed me. So, I mean, we need social interaction. We are born social beings. So you're not saying I'm not going to have social interaction, but you're curious with yourself is about what will that look like for me? Because I want to have good conversations with people. I want to see people, and I need to have fun. You know, you need to, and you're good at fun and having fun. But how might I do that with Fitz, who I am now? But also, I'm aware that in the background of that is your son has just gone to university.
Yeah.
That's a big transitional change.
Yeah, it was funny because I thought, you know, my youngest child is 5, and I've got another 4 children at home. So when Jimmy was heading off to university, I thought, oh, I'm going to be fine.
Piece of cake.
That's
I've got
right.
4 more kids. It's not like there's an empty nest here, baby.
But I have found it extremely, you know, it's a real, when you can actually feel an era ending, you know, it's not very often that you actually, it's literally this
it's
era
a moment.
ended.
There's an actual line.
Yeah, definitely. And the thing of him being at home with his younger siblings, and then the sort of, I was explaining to someone, you know, when you've got small children, you're always anxious about where they are. Where's, you know, when he was a little boy, where's Jimmy? Is he safe? Is he okay? Is he not running out in front of a car? Suddenly I'm taking him off to leave him in a big city. And of course he's a grown up, he's 21, he's been driving around the country, he's been off doing stuff, he's very independent. However, there is something sort of, you know, which feels kind of wrong in a way, to like be putting him in a place on his own. And if I know that's it's just a sort of instinctual feeling. I was talking to another friend about that, and she said, yeah, it's the opposite of what you've been doing for many years as a parent.
And that thing of kind of wanting to know where they are, and now you have no idea, because even when he was living at home before uni, he just said, I'm going to London for a few days, or I'm going to go and see a friend, or whatever I'm doing. You had a kind of broad idea. Now you have not the faintest idea.
No idea.
I've actually had clients that have had trackers on their young student children's phones with their permission,
Really?
Because they found the not knowing unbearable.
Gosh, but what do you think about that though? As a psychologist, what do you I mean, I can understand that. I can understand the anxiety and the feeling of not knowing, and yet it's not right for a young adult to be being tracked, is it? And I think I was at the same age. I was at university, but I'd also lived abroad, and that's important to have that time. I mean, it's important. You have to do that, isn't it? It's about growing up. It's becoming an adult.
I mean, I think the thing of parenting is that you give your children roots and wings, that they know they have a safe place that they can always come back to. But also you need to show that you trust them, that they can take care of themselves. And one way of trusting them is by letting them be who they are. And I think in this case it was a transitional thing. It lasted a term.
Right.
It sort of worked for them both.
Right.
And all of us change and develop at different rates and, you know, paces. It was enough for that term when it was a bit too much.
Yeah.
And then I think she trusted that she was okay, and they were all right. So I was just going to come back to Helen, who was saying, yes, it didn't. So she's the one with the long-term health issue. And she said, yes, it intensified. And for a while, it felt as if there was some empathy, solidarity. But now many people seem to have lost that empathy in the rush to get back to their normalcy. But this convo is kind. That's nice.
I think that that's true, that, you know, there was a lot of kindness around at the start of the pandemic. There was a lot of care for one another. There was a care for the world as well. There was a feeling of, amongst all of the many different things that were going on. Sometimes I heard people saying, well, there is also like a sense that for the world, you know, the world is maybe it's relief that that all the travel and all of the consumption, everything that's going on has stopped. So we were caring for each other. We were caring maybe for our environment. And there's, in a way, when I see in like magazines or Sunday supplements, like the return to glamour, the return to consumption.
Wear your heels.
Yeah, exactly. Wear your heels. Please don't make me wear heels again. But, but part of me feels, oh no, like,
haven't we learned anything?
Have we learned nothing?
Where's our humility? I think, I mean, what the research shows is that there was a real blitz spirit for the first sort of 3 months of the pandemic, which also coincided with this amazing spring with these skies, and we all felt grateful to nature and kind of closer to nature, and that the carbon dioxide levels dropped, etc. But then I think people got really worn down by the autumn, and then January, February, people it was really difficult for a lot of people, and you know, there was no energy virtually to look after themselves and their own family, let alone kind of reach out and be generous to each other in a supermarket.
Yeah.
And now I think everyone's confused. You know, they don't know what to trust. Is there going to be a winter lockdown, or is there not? And I think part of it, I mean, I don't think there's answers for these things, but I think it's being true to yourself and trusting what's right for you. Because the other thing, of course, that happened to you directly before lockdown was Nell died.
Yes.
So you've been experiencing enormous grief during the pandemic, and you can't kind of take that out of the equation. And Plum Russell is saying here, I don't really feel like socializing. I put it down to my mother having recently died. However, now I'm wondering, is it partly due to the pandemic? And I know I'm talking too much, but some people have said, in a way, the pandemic, when they were grieving, was a relief because they weren't forced to do things that they wouldn't have wanted to do. But other people have also felt, since the kind of unlock in July, there's this kind of expectation that their grief was on hold, so it feels surreal. So they haven't done anything, so then it feels very intense.
Yeah, and you know, during the pandemic, during the last year, I wrote a book about my experience of my sister dying. So she died in December 2019. So it was before the pandemic. So she was of the old world, you know. She'd never had any sense of what was going to come. She died of cancer, and it was very sudden death, but she never experienced the pandemic. And it's I mean, people weren't even really talking about COVID in this country in December, I don't think. And it
was just in the papers, wasn't it?
Just in the papers, but it seemed like something so far away. And it's very strange, the feeling of like emerging into a new world in which she never
isn't.
Yeah, she never experienced it at all. I feel, I mean, I've been finding recently, I've been thinking that the second year of grief might be harder than the first year in a way, because I suppose the person is being taken further into the past. And I was talking with my husband Peter about this, and he was saying sometimes when he looks at pictures of Nell, it's like looking at a picture of, you know, the long past, whereas it was, you know, last year it was just recent. You could almost
A
touch her
few
in
months ago.
pictures. Yeah. And I think that feeling of being removed, so wholly removed from the kind of dimension that you lived in together, and then having to kind of forge a new life. And I wrote in this book, I wrote about the weirdness of the relief of not having to go and socially interact, and not having to go to parties or work events,
Or say no to them, or have the energy to have to kind of even think about it.
yeah. But then you also have never experienced having a place to sort of take your grief to and try your grief out a bit, you know. Take it with you, because it's like
Take
a
it for a
being.
test drive.
Yeah, well, it's like a being that lives with you. And sometimes it's somebody messaged me today saying it's like a highwayman, and I think it, you know, it's like a sort of something is going to suddenly
It
jump out
comes
at
and grabs you.
Yeah. And I've been watching Succession again, a TV show that I absolutely love and Nell loved, and I found
You
it
must
so,
miss her.
I
Yeah.
just miss her so much, talking about it. And it's so brilliant on siblings and sibling rivalry and all the sibling stuff. And I actually can't watch the new stuff because I feel like I'm betraying her. So I'm watching the old
Being
stuff.
unfaithful because you
Yeah,
can't text her and say, oh my God.
yeah, exactly.
And I think, I mean, a lot of people talking about children leaving home, so we'll go back to that. But just to go with this thought about Nan and grief is, I think, often the second year, people, you know, your relationship with time alters in grief, and people often, or culturally, society expects a year, you're kind of after a year, you're more or less done. And actually, I think you're right in the sense that in reality, in you know, grieving is the task of facing the reality of the death. And I think in the second year, it's irreversible that she's died. You can't not know that you're not going to see her. And in the first year, there is a kind of surrealness, or as you said, you could almost touch her, you know, from months before. You could go back and remember. And of course, you go back and remember because that is always with you. But there's a bleakness to not creating new memories or not watching Succession with her again that isn't so present. And I think in some ways what you're also saying, and I think this is true of other people I've spoken to, is that the pandemic has held it in, it's sort of frozen it in some way.
Yes, I definitely think that's true. And I wonder sometimes this kind of feeling that I'm having at the moment of sort of fuzziness, lack of focus, you know, tentativeness is massively exacerbated by grief. And yet I think lots of people who are not grieving are feeling it as well. And I had a huge response today to this post that I did, and somebody mentioned something called pandemic flux, I think was a term
Yeah.
that they heard. And the unknown, I suppose we're quite bad, even though every single moment of our life is unknown, we're quite bad at dealing with the idea that it's here, aren't we? And at the moment we are kind of really going into an unknown. The sort of next bit of time feels really unknown. How do you think, though? I mean, people say be kind to yourself, be gentle on yourself, but as a kind of society, as people, how do you think we're going to move on from this and move into the next bit?
I don't think that moving on is possible. I don't think you move on from something. I think the work is to accommodate it, is to let it change you, so to allow it, so that the people's experience, you know, people's experience of the pandemic has been very different. But if we talk about your, you know, focusing on your experience, what I understand from you is that you need to respect and allow all of these different feelings that you have, and kind of recognize that grief does feel physiological, that you feel foggy, that it's hard to concentrate. And that could be grief from the pandemic, grief from Jimmy going to uni and from Nell, and you know, you're not like you can't portion it out, but all of that is a lot of systemic, big psychological shifts. And I think it's the movement between feeling the loss and naming it and expressing it, and then having things that give you hope and joy, like riding your horse or playing with your young children. Or for you, I mean, one of the things I kind of recognize in you is that creativity and probably writing is for you a source and a resource that gives you strength and resilience, so that you can dip into that, and that's how you find a way of surviving the high women coming and kind of taking you by the neck.
I mean, that for me at the moment, it feels absolutely crucial. And I definitely have found since Nell died, she was an incredibly creative person. She was like the artist in my big family. And it's been interesting because I didn't really feel as though I could be an artist beside her, I suppose, because she was so highly creative. You know, she had an incredible circus. She was always painting, writing, sewing, and she very much occupied this space. And I have found that since she died, my creativity, and it's one of the strange, you know, grief is full of so many strange things, isn't it? But there are good things that come from it. This is a sort of strange
Growth, there's
payoff.
growth that comes from it.
And is that I feel as though my creativity has just kind of has been allowed to flourish in a strange sort of way. And I do sometimes wonder whether that was because, you know, it's strange calling yourself an artist. It's a big thing to call yourself an artist. And Nell 100% was the artist and would call herself the artist. And for the first
So she
time,
had that in the sibling system.
Definitely.
That was her badge.
Definitely.
So you couldn't have the badge of artist.
Definitely.
That was taken.
Yeah, definitely. And I don't feel like I'm taking it from her, and her creativity will always be bigger than mine, but I do feel mine is being allowed to kind of to grow in a way, and that's been really exciting. Yeah. And the book that I've written, which somebody said is, when is it out? It's out in March next year, is about the kind of strange colors that light up your life after the death of somebody, and how, and the also unendurable, unbearable pain, and how you do as a human being learn, or how I as a human being have learned over a year to endure and grow from that pain and take that pain forward. Because, you know, as you well know, there are many times to start with when you just feel, I just can't, I'm going to die. I'm going to die.
Yeah.
And I would rather die. Yeah.
This pain is too bad.
Yeah.
And Martin Gervin, I think is how you said, he says growing around our grief. And it's, I guess what you're saying is that because you stayed with the pain and you kind of expressed it and really felt that you were going to die. I mean, it does feel, and also like a part of you died. The Nell part of you, her presence in your life died. And that was embodied in you, her kind of how big a part of her life in you. And in some ways, you didn't fight that. So what you did was that you, I mean, it's really devastating and awful feeling that bad, but you didn't fight it, you didn't block it. And in some ways, the pain of it freed you then to go to your flourishing side and find the words and the colors and name what you understood. And it's almost like that Nell kind of gave you permission to grow into that version of yourself as a writer.
Yes, I think that's true. And I think the thing of staying with the pain is really important to, in writing, for me, in writing and writing about grief and loss, and that's such a fundamental part of life. Sort of,
and for you, it's been a huge part of your
it's been
experience.
A huge part, because Mum had this accident when I was 16, which left her brain damage. So she was in a sort of state of, I had a kind of living grief that went on with a mother who was profoundly brain damaged for 22 years. So it is totally kind of who I am, and I am really fascinated by it. Someone's saying, what's your book called? It's called The Red of My Blood, and it's out in March. And
Good title.
I am really fascinated by loss and how it utterly shapes a person, but that also it can be for me it has been it's been an incredibly painful thing, incredibly difficult thing, but it has also, I have used it as a way of kind of spurring myself on and creating from it. But I think what you've just said about staying with the pain, I was talking to someone else about memoir writing. She was trying to write
But
about,
for someone who isn't social, you've been having a lot of conversations.
the odd chat. She was saying that she was trying to write about the death of her mother, and she had had a memoir writing class where somebody had said, you know, start writing a letter to your mother, and then if you find it too painful, just sign off.
Write a postcard, I'd say.
Yeah, but she said if you find it this teacher had said, if you find it too painful, just sign off. And I said, I'd actually really disagree with that. When you find it really painful,
stay with it.
Right, yeah, keep writing to her. Even if you're writing something that doesn't seem significant to you, don't put the pen down or shut your laptop. Don't leave at that point. I think if you want to mine the kind of stuff that helps you to grow and helps you to evolve as a human being, my way of doing it has been to walk directly into
towards
the face of it. Yeah. But it hurts.
Yeah. But I guess, I mean, we're both saying the same thing, and that this approach or attitude, if you like, can be used as much for this new way of engaging with life post-pandemic as it has been grieving now, or your mum, or Jimmy going to uni. I just want to read a few things that parents have said. Caroline Floyd said, having had 2 sons at Idor, having gone through university, including a year living in France, we're closer than ever. They do return to you. So, I mean, I think there's this feeling, and Juliet Nicholson is saying, the thing of not being needed anymore when children grow up is very dizzy making, and the structure dismantling, but then they come back. So everyone's saying the same thing. That if you're fortunate to have a good relationship, they come back. But they come back reconfigured too. So the whole family system is recalibrated. And I guess what we're both saying, and certainly what I said in this Too Shall Pass and Grief Works, is that those that don't engage with change, and that is as much unwanted change like Nell's death, or actually wanted change like your child stepping into adulthood and finding their wings and their lives, is that you need to engage with the pain and let it change you. And through that process, and it's very unique, you use creativity and you walk towards the pain with your pen, as it were, and your imagination, but other people can do it with gardening, with cooking, with painting, with talking to their best friend, whatever way people find it. It shifts something, and in shifting it, it allows other things to come through. And that when we block it, when we anesthetize it with busyness or self-importance or alcohol or drugs or food or moaning or whatever it is, it stays unchanged. So it just comes back and gets you again and again. And, all the research shows that people who don't adapt and change have much less joy in life and don't thrive. Whereas as painful as it is walking towards the fire, as you've described, you don't look, you look very alive. You sound very alive. You sound alive to your pain as well as to your love. For Nell, for your other kids, for life, and for your writing. And that is living. Who said that living isn't about pain?
Yes, I think that's also so interesting, because we do feel as though we want to take the pain away. The pain should be taken away, that it shouldn't be this painful, or we should be able to find some fix for the pain, I suppose. And I've been thinking a lot lately about the fact that it just is life just is painful, and that's okay, and just be
wrestle
that.
it.
Yeah. It's not wrong because it's painful. I mean, I've also been interested by, sometimes I am told by some people, oh, don't, you know, if you keep on talking about it, then does it make it worse? And why do you keep talking about certain things? And I was talking to Mark Lemon about it, actually. I did a live with him, and he's so articulate to talk to about that, and that feeling that for me, as it is for him, talking about it is a way of continually processing it and honoring it as well.
It becomes part of you. It's that thing, like you said before, about the guy said before, Martin said before, like you grow around it. You don't forget and move on. You don't kind of close the door, get over it, and move on. It becomes part of you. So it becomes part of all of what you're thinking about. And, you know, Nell travels with you. Your mum travels with you, both when she was in a coma and since her death. She hasn't kind of disappeared. She's part of you and shapes you and influences you.
Completely. And I do feel as though I sort of carry her in some way or another, sometimes in a state of irritation with her, sometimes in a state of
God's sake, let me go.
Often trying to, like, you know, she had such a funny take on life. She had such an unusual take on life, and like trying to remember things that she said and did. And then I found a notebook where I was arguing today. I found a notebook where I'd been arguing with her, and it was quite good reading about some arguments, because then you sort of remember the human aspect as well, that it's
not this idealized Saint Nell sort of thing.
Yeah.
Can I just bring in some listeners, because Elizabeth Barrett says, you've both helped me so much with your writing, and that's nice, writing and words. What you say about grief opening up possibilities is so interesting. I suppose there is a weird privilege of knowing the unique pain, because the level of the pain, Elizabeth, is the level of the love. And so it's the unique privilege of loving, isn't it?
I also think it's the unique privilege of having experienced this acute human, you know, this strange, weird, and I first experienced when I was 16, which sometimes I feel sad about that, because it was like a lot of trauma when I was young, but also I feel like it was a big privilege. It was living. It was you know, it was really,
it was intense. You weren't
something.
living some flat kind of boring life. I mean, you wanted to die at times, but you knew you were human and very kind of in the world. And Carol Bruce said, do you show your children your pain? I think that's such an interesting question.
Yes, I absolutely do, because I think that knowing how to face pain and process it and alchemize it, hopefully into something beautiful or positive, or just into kind of normal life as well, is one of the most fundamentally important things that you can, you know, it's as important as educating a child in maths and English, as teaching them how to cook, teaching them how to do the things that you like. It's so important. If you think you can shield your children from pain, then you can't.
Disservice.
Shielded. Yeah, nobody can be shielded from it. And so my children have always seen me in pain, but hopefully not in kind of just hysterical pain. You know, they have seen me kind of living with it and
then cooking the dinner and getting them into bed.
Yeah,
it doesn't,
like, you know, if you're in a relationship and your children see you having an argument and then hopefully getting over that argument,
having a hug, or say something funny that tells them what a pain they are, but also that you love them.
Yeah.
But also children learn from what you model, not from what you say. So, I mean, as you said, you can't hide it. Even if you're kind of white knuckling it, they'll read you. They'll know something's going on. And what they imagine is so much worse than the reality of it. You know, that it's far better that they see you tearful, that you can say you're missing Nell or whatever the thing is going on. And then they're not wondering, like, what's wrong with mum? Is it me? Have I done something wrong? Have I upset her? Have I missed it? So we've only got a few minutes. Is Caroline was saying, one of the ways I found helps with the enormous pain of grief is trying to find small windows of self-care, both mental and physical. Not easy with 5 children, but important nonetheless. And I think I want to ask you, because I think that self-care, people say it and then they don't know what others mean by it. And yet, of course, it is absolutely vital that, you know, the first step in any way of having your life is being in relationship with yourself and meeting yourself with compassion and respect and care. But what does your self-care look like?
Allowing myself to finding a time where I can be on my own, basically, because that's and then using that time. I mean, I felt awful this morning. I felt really, really, really bad.
For no reason, you just woke up like that. It was the highwayman.
Yeah, and I've just been feeling really, you know, this feeling of overwhelm lately, and I went and I've been finding work very difficult to focus on work, and I went and I sort of made myself sit with my work, and so for me that is actually self-care, definitely the kind of
JFDI, what I call JFDI, just frigging do it. Don't think you're going to get the muse or some marvelous, just sit down.
Yeah.
Do the thing. And that's true of exercise, just effing do it.
And also the other thing I found lately is I've not been drinking for 5 weeks, which I was really pleased about.
Wow.
And I have been I was sent some really, really, really nice face cream with a real herbally
stroking her
smell.
cheek.
Yeah, that's quite good for self-care. That's really easy to do.
A treat.
That's so easy to do. So yeah, time alone, time alone and some nice face cream. I tell you what, I've also
and your dogs and your horses and nature.
And also one thing that I've started doing in the last couple of weeks, which I've started volunteering for a charity for 1 hour a week. And I've only done it for a few weeks. It's for the Riding for the Disabled. And I am absolutely loving that feeling of going and doing something for somebody else. And I would have thought before, I haven't got time. Actually, I can spend an hour less on my phone that day, and I can make that time. And that feeling of kind of doing something outside of my life and for other people. I know that sounds like a sort of worthy cliche, and I don't mean it
at all.
But that has been incredibly. It's brought me real joy in the last few weeks, definitely.
And I mean, obviously I know that because that's the sort of job I'm in. But all the research shows that helping others helps you. That people who connect and the altruism is good for your immunity. You actually physiologically feel better because I think we're wired to connect, and feeling like you make a difference for an hour a day really shifts your mood.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so lovely talking to you. I'm just going to read a few of the other lovely comments. So, Mark, hi, you're saying that you agreed with something, but I'm sure you were agreeing with what we said about what you said. But Ellen said, some days we wake up and grief is just there. Others it is less there. So odd and unpredictable. It's exactly like the weather, isn't it? You wake up and it's a sunny day for no reason, and it's a cloudy, terrible day for no reason. And Catherine Brennan said, we've all been in a state of provisional existence, on hold, waiting in limbo, hard for us all. And yet we get to connect like this. And I do feel really connected to my community on Instagram. And I know that you do. Should we just finish on that? Will you talk about how you feel with this community, your Instagram community?
So I only turned the camera on me when the pandemic started. I never thought I could do it before. And, then I just thought, okay, well, I'm going to do it. And I have found it such a enormously consoling, connecting human place to come together with people. And
so surprising and warm and kind of feel better. It's self-care in a way.
Absolutely. And the opposite of what people say, which is that it's meaningless and
fake,
superficial, and I found absolutely the opposite of that there is there's a real connection to people, which has been and it's company, it's kind of kindness, it's jokes, it's ideas, it's a wonderful place, and it can be used in such a positive way and create. I have ideas, I write about them. I love it when people really say yes, I'm really interested by that. Yeah, it helps. So no, Instagram for me is a huge kind of huge force for the good, definitely. And I love my friendships on here. I really do.
So that's a lovely way to end. And so, well, thank you, Clover. That's been such an interesting, and you've been so open and honest as you always are. You are within your writing, you are here. And I think, you know, the most honest is the most universal. I think everyone listening can really resonate with you. And I feel close to you across the screen, you know,
I know.
100 miles away, whatever we are. And thank you, everyone who's watched and listened and engaged with us and given us your thoughts. Like Marie, you've joined a pottery course. That's fantastic. So thank you. And maybe we'll do it again. We can
Yeah,
do it certainly around your book,
yeah,
but
yeah. I'd
maybe
love
before
to.
as well.
I'd love to.
And we didn't even talk about homeschooling and all the hell of that. But anyway.
It's been really lovely. Thank you so, so much, Julia. It's been really lovely.
Lovely seeing you. Thank you, Clover. Lots of love.
Bye bye.
Bye.